Could you do a Toughness Matters deck for $15? That would be a cool deck to see. Suggestion for Commander, Rasad. A Toughness Matters deck with Rasad? Oh, I can do that. That'll be funny, T. Here's the commander of the day, Rasad Yin Bashir. He's a 3-mana Toughness Matters commander. He's 0 and 3. Each creature you control assigns damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. When Rasad attacks, if you have the initiative, double the toughness of every creature you control. Oh, and we get to choose a background. Oh, that's so cool. I can't wait to choose a background and then potentially ruin whatever this deck was actually supposed to be, because the background is raised by giants. That's right, everybody. I lied. It's not a Toughness Matters deck. It's a Voltron deck. We are here to hit somebody for 20 damage. All we have to do is add a single 1/1 counter to Rasad, and that is all we need to do to ruin somebody's day. That's it. That is the top and the bottom of our strategy completely. Rasad Yin Bashir is here for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to swing his cane into somebody's eyeballs for 22 damage, because the way this deck works, it will always be about 22 damage. And that's because I lied again. It's not just a Voltron deck, it's also a dungeon deck, which is why we have 14 dungeon cards in here. Don't you like deck building? Don't you like Magic the Gathering? This is one of the worst mechanics that Magic's ever printed, and yet here we are, abusing the crap out of it. And let's talk about why. So, cards like Avenging Hunter come into play and make us take the initiative. Our commander sees that and says, oh, all of our creatures attack as though they have double toughness. And Raised by Giants sees that and says, then I guess you have 10 toughness. I guess you swing as though you have 20 toughness. Gee, boy, howdy. Wouldn't it be so weird if the initiative had the ability to put us into a dungeon that gave us, oh, I don't know, +1/+1 counters? Gee, that would be so weird if it did. I wonder if the initiative does that. Here, just really quickly, let's take a look here. If we do the deck view, we can scroll down to the tokens the deck needs down at the very end. Let's expand it, and oh, looky boy, howdy, here's the Undercity. What does it do? Well, the Undercity says, the second level of the Undercity puts 2 1/1 counters on a target creature. Wow, that's so weird that bit of very relevant text is written on the Undercity. I wonder what champion, what commander we're going to put those 1/1 counters on. Boy, howdy. I wonder if we're just going to be putting the 1/1 counters on our commander so that it becomes a 2/5. And then with Master and Giants, its base, power, and toughness are 10/10, so it's actually a 12/12. And then because of its effect, if you have the initiative, it's going to swing not as a 12/12, but as a 24/24. Oh, God, it's such a weird mechanic. The dungeon is so bad. It's so poorly made. God, I wish Wizards of the Coast never made it. I'm lying. I adored this mechanic. This is everything I like in Magic the Gathering rolled into a little ball. It is a sub-game within the game that only I get to play because I'm the only one building a deck around it. The Undercity, the way all dungeons work, you get to go into the Tomb of Annihilation, the Lost Mines of Phandelver, or the Dungeon of the Mad Maze if you happen to be going into the dungeon. If you have the initiative, though, you are forced to go into the Undercity. The way the Undercity works is you can search your library for a basic land the first time you go into the Undercity, put it in your hand, but the second time you go in, either by completing a dungeon or while in the Undercity, or getting the initiative again, or if it's your upkeep while you have the initiative, you can then put 2 1/1 counters on a creature or scry 2. And then if you follow the arrows, you can only go where the arrows want you to go. So if you choose the Forge, you can only go into either Trap or Arena. If you choose Lost Well, you can either go into Arena or Stash. All the way down until you finish the dungeon. And of course, the dungeon, when you finish it, you reveal the top 10 cards of your library, put any creature from among them on the battlefield with 3 1/1 counters, and then it gains hexproof until your next turn. We don't care about that. That's free value. That's free. Like, the dungeon is free draw. It is amazing. It does a lot of work for us. The real reason we are going in it is to abuse the ever-loving crap of our commander's ability. So, let's go back to that dungeon section and talk about what everything does and why it does the things it does. So, let's go ahead and begin instead with Find the Path, one of our ramp pieces that puts us in the dungeon when we play it. Veteran Dungeoneer ETBs to go into the dungeon, so is Cloister Gargoyle. Our commander also lets us avoid Cloister Gargoyle's negative effect of being an 0/4 when it comes out. Delver's Torch gives a creature 1/1. Oh, gee, howdy. I wonder what that means for our commander. That might mean that our commander gets to swing for a whopping 24/24 or 22/22. God, that's so weird. But the Delver's Torch gives a creature 1/1, and whenever it attacks, we get to go into the dungeon. Undermouth Adventurer gives us the initiative when it enters the battlefield, and it's also a mana dork. Underseller's Sweep gives us the initiative when it comes onto the battlefield and draws us tokens to protect our commander from edict effects when we attack. Trailblazer's Torch gives us the initiative when it comes onto the battlefield, and if our creature gets blocked, we can deal 2 damage to every creature blocking it, allow us to basically outmath all of the blockers. Dungeoneer's Pack comes into the play tapped, but we can also get the initiative by sacking it, and then we also draw a card and get a treasure token. A very wonderful thing to have in our back pocket if we want to go, hey, I'm going to enter combat, but before that, I'm going to crack the pack. Now I have the initiative, and somebody's going to die. Goliath Paladin gives us the initiative when it comes onto the battlefield. Nadar lets us go to the dungeon every time it swings and gets on the battlefield. But it also has the ability to give all of our creatures 1/1 if we've completed a dungeon. Gee, I wonder what giving our creatures 1/1 does to our commander. Avenging Hunter gives us the initiative when it ETBs. Eliwick Tumblestrom has a lot of abilities. She can +1 to make us go into the dungeon. She can -2 to let us look at the top 6 cards of our library, reveal any creature from among them, and put it into our hand, and if it's legendary, we gain 3 life. Or we can neg it by 7 to get an emblem to give all of our creatures 2/2 trample and haste for every differently named dungeon we've completed. Gee, I wonder if we ever ult her, what would possibly happen to our opponent's life totals. Then we have the White Plume Adventurer. When it ETBs, we take the initiative, and at the beginning of every opponent's upkeep, we get to untap a creature we control. But if we have finished a dungeon, we untap all creatures we've controlled. And then we have Radiant Solar, a flying life leak angel that can discard itself to go into the dungeon, or it can be on the board, and every time we bring a creature onto the board, we get to go into the dungeon with that. An absolutely broken effect. It's going to let us go into the dungeon so many times and draw so many cards and get so many free things, which is going to be needed because, well, our deck only has a 5-card draw engine, which is not great. But because we are not a Power Matters deck, we don't get access to things like Return of the Wild Speaker until we have our commander's secondary thing out. So we can't really rely on that kind of stuff to draw, like Rishkar's Expertise and Return of the Wild Speaker. So instead, we are stuck with these little bits of recurrable draw, beginning with Harmonize, non-recurrable, but it draws us 3 cards. Wall of Blossom, Spirited Companion, and Wall of Omens all draw us 1 card when they ETB, which, of course, if we blink them at any point, they will give us those abilities again. We are not a blink deck, but if you wanted to take this deck in the direction of being a blink deck, these would give you access to that. Otherwise, they are just creatures that get to come onto the board and be, well, they get to be walls, basically, between our opponents and us. And with our recursion, we can get their effects at least once more during a game. And then finally, we have Dawn of Hope. Anytime we gain life, we can pay 2 to draw a card. Because one of our dungeons does have life gain built into it, here, I'll go ahead and show you which one. Lost Mines of Fendelver, the Dark Pool, right before the draw ability, gives us the ability to gain a life and then draw a card. And the Dungeon of the Mad Mage has gaining a life built into the first room of it. This means that we have plenty of ways when we are not in the initiative of gaining life and triggering that ability. So, that is a very important thing to remember. You don't have to be in the Undercity to have the initiative and gain benefits of that effect. But of course, most of the time we will be in the Undercity when we are using our effects. But that is our most thick part of the deck. That is the dungeon section and the draw section. The dungeons are basically doing the heavy lifting for our draw more than anything because, again, our deck cannot draw as many cards being a Selesnya deck, so we have to rely on other mechanics since we do not have the Power Matters or the Little Creatures Matters abilities that white and green would give us respectively. Though, that said, our commander does have a hefty secondary partner attached to him. The Raised by Giants is a 6-mana card, so we need an equally hefty ramp package to pay for that. Starting with Terramorph, a 4-mana card that will get us 2 basic lands on the battlefield untapped over the course of 2 turns because of Rebound. Dungeon Map, a mana rock that can double as a Venture into the Dungeon trigger. Map the Waste searches our library for any basic land card, and then it bolsters our commander by 1, which is literally all we need for him to do lethal damage to people. Bonder's Ornament is a draw spell masquerading as a mana rock. Dawn Treader Elk can sack itself to give us a land from our battlefield from our deck onto the battlefield tapped. Explore lets us draw a card and then put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. Font of Fertility is a budget Wayfarer's Bauble. Search for Tomorrow and Beanstalk Giant can both pay 3 mana to give us a land from our library onto the battlefield untapped, but Search for Tomorrow doubles as a first turn play we have access to, along with Wild Growth, which can make a land tap for an additional green. Explore the Underdark is another way to give ourselves the initiative while also getting us 2 basic land cards onto the battlefield tapped. And, of course, because it gives us the initiative, this also will give us the gain a basic land from the deck into our hand ability. Sara Vex Tome gives us the initiative and also gives us mana by tapping it, double mana if we happen to have the initiative, but we can also exile cards on top of our library until we exile a non-land card, and then cast that card without paying its mana cost if we have completed a dungeon. Card can do work. Then we have Rampant Growth, 2 mana ramp spell, very, very simple, and then Sonic Screwdriver, a 3-mana mana rock that can also untap an artifact or make our commander unblockable, or scry 1 if we really need the mana for that. But the unblockable is the most important part because we want our commander to get in there and ruin people's days. Speaking of getting in there, let's talk about that package, beginning with Cloak of the Bat. It gives our commander flying and haste. All it has to do. Cliffhaven Kite Sail has 1 mana and equip 2, but it auto-equips to our commander when it comes onto the board, giving it flying. Maul of the Skyclaves also auto-equips to our commander when it hits the board, but it gives it flying and first strike combined. Hot Soup can make our commander completely unblockable, but if it's dealt damage in any way, destroy it. However, most of the times when a commander is dealt damage, they just die, so that makes sense. Then we have Cloudsteel Kieran, gives our commander flying, and the effect that we cannot lose the game and our opponents can't win the game, which is a wonderful effect to have if you are playing a Voltron deck, because oftentimes people will just beat the crap out of you the minute that you have eliminated one player from the table. And then the most important one in our deck, Diviner's Wand. Equipped creature has, whenever you draw a card, this creature gains 1/1 until end of turn, and flying. You know, the exact things we need to close out the game on anybody. And also it has a 4-mana draw card effect as well that we can use and sink our mana into, since we're not casting that many spells in a turn once we are set up in a dungeon. But we have to keep our commander safe and sane, so we have a protection package to bolster him as well. Swiftfoot Boots gives him hexproof and haste. The Pandarica gives us the ability to throw him into the phasing zone so that he cannot be targeted by anything for a turn cycle. Semester's End and Lazelle's Acrobatics give us the ability to blink our entire board, which can throw us right into the dungeon like 5 or 6 times, immediately completing one while dodging things like board wipes. Absolutely stunning cards, and they are the only form of blink in the deck, but they are very useful considering we have to go into the removal section where some of these are actually blinkable. Beginning with Broken Wings, blow up an artifact or enchantment or a creature with flying. Make your move, blows up an artifact or enchantment or any creature with power 4 or greater. You find a cursed idol, can blow up an artifact or enchantment or give us a treasure and go into the dungeon. Meteor Golem is always in every deck I build for the most part, so he's here as well because he can blow up any non-land permanent an opponent controls. Generous Gift can blow up any permanent and then give them an elephant. Return to Nature can blow up an artifact, enchantment, or a card in somebody's graveyard. Shower of Arrows can blow up an artifact, enchantment, or a creature with flying and scry us 1. Colony Ambush gives us the ability to make our commander fight anything, which it will probably be bigger than anyway. And then Angel of the Ruins, a just wonderful plane cycling card that can also come out of the board and exile 2 artifacts or enchantments. This card is more important now than ever, now that we have silly things like the One Ring running around and just scaring people to death. Then we have a very deep recursion package so that we can get back our initiative triggers. This is a very important part of the deck because we only want to ever swing when we have the commander, the enchantment for the commander, and the initiative. If we have those three things, we can delete a player off the table. So we try to make sure we always have the initiative by recurring our stuff, beginning with Resurrection, a 4-mana resurrect spell. Timeless Witness, a 4-mana card that puts a card from our graveyard into our hand. Savine's Reclamation can revive any of our 3-mana or less permanents. And it can, that didn't be our Sabine's Tome, actually, which is helpful. And it has Flashback, which can make it happen twice if we play it from the graveyard. Sun Titan can recurribly get our 3-mana or lower permanents from the graveyard to the battlefield. Karmic Guide can do it once. And Eternal Witness is the better version of Timeless Witness in terms of mana value. So we are recurring lots of things. We are going into the dungeon repeatedly. We are giving our commander flying. We are punching people in the noggin and deleting them with a single punch. But there's a thing this deck also gets access to, which is really neat. Asymmetric board wipes. So because Raised by Giants gives our commander 10/10 and the giant stat, it is a giant as a subtype. So Realm Cloaked Giant's cast-off ability will destroy everything but our commander when we cast it as a board wipe. Dusk also won't blow up our commander when we don't have the background out, because it will blow up everything with power 3 or greater, which of course doesn't include our commander. Fell the Mighty can also destroy all creatures with power greater than 0, because of our commander's power being 0. So we just play Fell the Mighty, choose our commander, blow up the entire board, and then laugh maniacally. Also, Dusk has a backside called Dawn, which can get all creatures with power 2 or 2 or less from our graveyard to our hand, which includes things like Cloister Gargoyle for our deck, though not many other cards in our deck fit this particular bill. But it will get back Cloister Gargoyle, it will get back all the draw engine cards between the walls and the Spirited Companion. And aside from that, it won't be able to get too much more back, so you're not really going to be getting a lot of value off of that secondary effect. And then, of course, we have a mana base we got to get into. 4 dual lands: Sungrass Prairie, Fortified Village, Command Tower, and Canopy Vista. Very, very simple Selesnya lands. Fetching lands, of course, with Myriad Landscape being a ramping fetch land. Escape Tunnel, which is a very interesting land in this deck, because what Escape Tunnel can do for us is it can make our commander unblockable for the turn, but only if we play it very specifically. So if our commander's out on the board as an 0/3, right? Because that's his base, power, and toughness. And we have the mana to cast Raised by Giants. We don't cast Raised by Giants immediately if we have the Escape Tunnel in our hand. So what we do is we play the Escape Tunnel, and then we crack it, making our commander unblockable because its power is currently 2 or less. Then we play Raised by Giants, and then we get the initiative of, any of the ways we can get the initiative, so that our commander will have the double power and toughness clause. If we thread things that way, our commander gets to be unblockable because of that land, while also swinging for 20, which is an absolute busted way of using Escape Tunnel. Shire Terrace and Promising Vein and Bant Panorama are all the same cards, untapped lands that can sack themselves for mana. And then we have Rogue's Passage, which can just make our commander unblockable outright, followed by 14 forests and 12 plains. And that, my friends, is me lying to you once again about the kind of deck I'm building. I did not actually build Toughness Matters Rasad. I built Voltron Dungeons Rasad because I have a mental sickness, and it is the dungeon mechanic. But what about upgrades? What would I do if I had a higher budget for the deck and I wanted to go a little bit further? Board wipe section, I'd largely keep the same. These are all asymmetrical and do exactly what our deck wants to do. As for the dungeon, there are a couple of initiative cards that cost about $4 or $5. I would add in more cards that say the initiative as opposed to cards that say enter the dungeon. So like Veteran Dungeoneer and Cloister Gargoyle would end up leaving for more of the initiative triggers specifically. As for our draw section, Sylvan's Library would get us there in this section. Once you increase the budget, you fix the draw problem of the deck pretty quickly. Putting an Archivist of Ulm in, putting cards like Howling Mine in, if you really want to draw extra cards and make your opponents love you, you have access to those when you increase the budget. As for the get in there stuff, going and taking out some of the more expensive ways to get unblockable and flying, I would keep the Cloudsteel Kieran and the Cloak of the Bat, obviously. The Diviner's Wand is a bit overcosted. It's serving multiple functions in our version of the deck, but in a non-budget version of the deck, I would swap this out for a better flight mechanism. I wish we had blue, because that has some of the best ones. But As for the protection section, I would add in an Eerie Interlude into here, and I would swap out the Pandorica for something like a Teferi's Protection. I would also add in Lightning Greaves on top of the Swiftfoot Boots so that we had more ways of protecting our commander and giving it haste. As for ramp, I would throw out Terramore for a Sky Shroud claim. I would swap out things like, Beanstalk Giant and Font of Fertility and Dawn Shredder Elk for Sakura Tribe Elder, Farseek, and Nature's Lore. And then, of course, Wild Growth is great, but having Wild Growth and Utopia Sprawl is just infinitely better, so I would use both of those. As for Recursion, I'm actually pretty comfortable with the Recursion package. I would probably take the Resurrection out, though, and swap it for maybe even just a singular Scroll Shift as a blink card, so that we could blink the Witnesses and the Sun Titan and the Karmic Guide. I think that would be a better way of doubling up on that than having the Resurrection in a non-mana-hungry version of the deck, or non-budget version of the deck. Removal and interaction, you're in white-green, so once you have no budget, you can go and add in a Beast Within, you can add in Get Lost, you can add in Stroke of Midnight, just lots of instant speed, Omni-style removal, Fateful Absence. All of those cards put in a lot of work in a deck like this and add to its flexibility when it comes to removal. And as for lands, I mean, just go to Mana the Gathering and look up dual lands, and just add in all of those Selesnya lands that don't come into play tapped, and they will serve you very, very well. But with that all said, that was my deck list for Rasad in Bashir, and if you enjoyed it, let me know in the comment section below, and I hope you all do not mind me constantly trolling you with dungeon decks. As always, everybody, insert into video tagline here. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability that Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Blitzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, Sagitt, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.